So I'm so excited to meet with you today, Gabe. So I have been noticing like things that you've been posting about childhood trauma, and it is like right in the alignment with what I'm doing with my own, patients and families and practice. And I thought it would be a great idea for us to connect and like kind of boost the message, if you will.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's something that definitely should be um, boosted in awareness. And I think it's a major part of the problems we see today with chronic illnesses, especially, but um, a variety of different ailments that people are suffering from, whether it's a poor self-image or all the way to chronic pain and even diabetes itself are all linked to the earliest experiences that people have in their childhood years.
Absolutely. So I know that we're recording, and like I don't know what your thoughts are, if we want to like stream live to Facebook, if we just want to have a conversation, if we do want to do a formal interview. We didn't really
We
talk too much about that.
Yeah, we can either one. I'm perfectly fine with going live if you'd like to. That's perfectly fine. Would you like me to make you co-host so you can actually record this, I think, as well?
Oh, sure. Yeah,
Okay.
that's an option. Yeah,
Okay.
that sounds great. Where are you at with your practice?
There
Can
we
you give
go.
me a little bit of background and update? Because I haven't like met you really in any of our groups. So tell me a little bit about where you're at in terms of launching and all that.
Okay. So where I'm at in launching or where I'm like at physically living.
Sure, both.
Okay. So we currently live in Northwest Arkansas, and we've been a resident here for about a little over a month. So I moved to mid Tennessee for about a year, and before that, I lived in Kansas City. My wife and I ran a functional medicine practice in Kansas City, and there we treated 1,500 patients for nearly 10 years, from all around the United States, but there were sparse places of the world that they had come and visit us as well. And we basically dealt with a lot of mystery illnesses. We dealt with a lot of Lyme and things like that. So more stealth infections than anything else.
Mhm.
And over the course of nearly a decade, we noticed a pattern um, that started to emerge. And this pattern was that around 75% of the patients would begin to unintentionally sabotage their results. So they would come in, we would do some testing, we would look at their previous medical records and get the whole picture of what was going on. And we did, for the last 10 years, we've worked on emotions. So I've done body code practicing from Bradley Nelson and various other energy type medicines to clear out emotions and help them resolve maybe chaotic experiences and whatnot. And so we had that as an integral part of our system we used for helping people with their illness. And yet still about 75% of people started to sabotage their results. So they would come in, they would do all the works, put them through some herbal cleanses, have some lifestyle adjustments, some dietary changes, exercise recommendations, all the things like that, including sunlight and mindful exercises, breathing exercises, if you will. And within a year or so, they would usually stop doing some parts of that, and they would have either an illness come back or develop a whole new type of illness that was maybe even unrelated to what they previously came in for. And this was a pattern that I noticed with a lot of my colleagues as well, including some of my mentors.
Yeah.
I started to share this with my mentors of functional medicine, and many of them just kind of didn't put much thought into it. So they recognized it, they saw it. It just wasn't as troubling, perhaps, as it was for me.
Sure.
And so we started diving deeper into this, and that's where I got really introduced to how the unconscious mind works. Although I was familiar with it and working with, emotional conflicts, I didn't dive near deep into the unconscious as was necessary to provide the long-term changes that we were looking for in people. And so once we started going to the unconscious, then a pattern started emerging that it was all related to trauma. And then I started studying all kinds of different techniques for several years on what do you do with the unconscious,
Yep.
how are memories stored, and how do you resolve this? And so that got me into looking at the way memories are stored are holographic, and many of the techniques that I studied, including Psych K, including hypnosis, including EFT and even EMDR, they addressed putting the body in kind of a, they all have altered states of consciousness involved, which is necessary to get into that conscious, or bypass the conscious mind and get into the unconscious, where the change work is needed to, provide the person with some resolution from whatever they might be having.
Yep.
And I found that these were helpful in some cases, and in many cases, they reduce the impact of the memories. But our memories are stored as holograms, which are like a three-dimensional image. Our senses work this way. Leading neurologist Carl Pruden demonstrated that all our senses and all our memories are three-dimensional holograms made of millions of little fragments, and each tiny fragment contains the entire memory. So we can do things to reduce that memory itself, but oftentimes we leave fragments behind. And when we leave fragments behind, all it takes is a certain emotional, state,
Trigger.
an environmental trigger, right?
Sure.
A smell, someone texting you that you'd long lost, try to get out of your life. And
Yep.
next thing you know, it triggers that fragment and the entire memory comes back. And so I noticed a lot of short-term results with some of these other techniques. And once I started understanding how holograms work, my wife and I trademarked a technique to where we actually address the entire structure of holograms, and we regress people back. So we go back to the very first emotion, the very first time that was actually stored, the very first insult, if you will, when their nervous system first stored that primary hologram. And the results have been outstanding. So we work from home. We have a home office. I'm 100% virtual, and the people that come into us have usually tried everything, including functional medicine. And but basically what we do is help them reframe those holographic memories, and it puts their body into it gets their body out of the fight or flight and into the rest and digest state.
Yep.
And you can do a lot of different environmental, different environmental changes. You can eat different and get organic food, get clean water, start exercising, and take in good whole food supplements. But if you have a chaotic program running on the unconscious mind, all your cells are essentially eavesdropping to that, and either your results will be short-lived, or you're just not going to be able to maintain the proper cell signal necessary for overall health of the neurology.
This is so fascinating. I have not heard of this technique before. So like play it out for me. So, if I'm coming in as a client, I'm thinking a lot of us have resistance where we're like, I don't remember my childhood, or, I don't want to revisit those memories. I've done my therapy and I'm all set. I've processed everything. I'm good, And so like I have so many questions, like how do we move someone through that? How do we help them get to that early insult, first insult to kind of start your treatment process?
Right. So during that, whenever people come in, and that's a very accurate response that many people have is they either don't remember their childhood or they've tried different therapies and they on the surface they feel okay. So what's different about our approach is usually when they come in, the first thing I tell them is you're the bottom line why you're calling us or contacting us is there's still some feeling lingering around in your body or in your head. Maybe you have a chronic headache or something keeping you on edge. It
Yeah.
it has to be a feeling state. Um, we don't really spend a lot of time interviewing and trying to structure and break things down to where the story is and how the problem started and everything else, because when the person comes in, they might believe that they know the problem, when the problem started, and what's happened, and they've forgiven that person, so all is good.
Mhm.
But what they don't realize is the part of their mind that's telling them this is a very, very small fragment of consciousness. So basically, your conscious mind, the part that you are aware of, the part that tells you the voice in your head, is the last to know anything and the least informed of your entire nervous system. And
Yeah.
it's the only part that uses words. And its job is to come up with
Mm.
rationalizations and justifications. Um, so when they come in, they'll have a story, and I don't mind listening to that. But once we get the unconscious mind involved, and the thing I tell them is the unconscious mind is always going to answer first. It's always going to be right. It's never loud. It's a faint whisper or a feeling. Um, and you'll have an insane urge to want to edit it. In other words, you'll think you're making it up.
Yeah.
So once I start telling them that, then we can ask specific questions and little things start coming up, and they never have to do with a story. They just have to do with a feeling. So people never have to know what caused what. They never have to relive the trauma again because we just pinpoint the feeling and everything about human behavior. And this would just really narrow down all the approaches of many other therapies if they just understood this. It all comes down to this: hundreds of thousands of dollars, years and years of studying. It all comes down to everything in the human um, behaviors is driven by feelings. It's
Yeah.
either something we want less of or something we want more of. And I mean, you could hear a song, which is, an auditory stimulation comes in your ears, and it brings back a memory, a three-dimensional memory of high school prom or something like that. And next thing you know, you have a feeling come up. You could smell fresh apple pie, and all of a sudden, a memory comes up of your grandmother's kitchen, and there's a feeling associated with that.
Mhm.
So the stories of the high school prom and the stories of grandma's kitchen, we never have to talk about. We just go after the feelings, and people have no problem generating the feelings that they don't want anymore. So that comes right up to the surface. And that gives us everything we need to access the hologram and remove it without having to even know, well, where did it come from? When was it formed? Who did what to me, whatever else. And so we use feelings as kind of a guideline. And then we start with some holographic deletion techniques. We start removing active running apps. And I usually ask a person, where are you at today? If we had to scale this 0 to 10,
Yeah.
10 being a feeling of misery or depression or something that you just don't want anymore. Okay. Where are you? And we usually go through some pretty simple, very fast techniques that they don't even have to know what it is. They just have to know there's some kind of feeling I don't want anymore. And it's usually going to be in the body somewhere. So we get the somatic body involved. We don't sit and close our eyes and kind of meditate because these holographic memories are stored throughout the body. They're stored anywhere, usually in our heart or usually in our gut, because there's 1,000 neurons per square inch, and our brain, our heart, and our gut are all basically processors. And we can take an entire traumatic event and store it in one neuron. And that's where there's a significant amount of neurons at, is in our heart and our gut. So we get that involved. We start to remove the feelings that they don't like. Again, they don't even have to know what it is or where it came from or anything else. Just a specific dialogue with the unconscious. We have all we need to pinpoint that hologram and have them act it out. They're doing everything. I'm just kind of guiding them how to do it. And then we get them down from a 10 to a 6, and then down to a 2, and down to a 1 right then. And then the significant one that they're coming for, whether it's shame or whether it's depression or whether it's you know, poor self-image, or if it's something like an autoimmune, you know, what I do is have them quite simply see if they believe they'll get better,
Right.
or if it's something else, because that's where everything really comes in. And that's what I think is something that a lot of my colleagues miss out on, but I will hear it in their words. Sometimes they'll have patients come in and the patients just say, you know, I don't know if I'll ever get better. And that belief system is usually formed in their identity state of the ages of 0 to 6 years old. So if it's that, what I'll do is have them say something like, picture yourself, you know, being depressed, having no depression. So what would that be like? You'd be free, you'd be happy, you'd be joyous every day. Have them say a few statements like that, and they'll notice icky feelings come up in the body, not a voice, icky feelings. And if we can feel it, we can change it. So then I have them locate that icon, that stored memory, through a series of questions. We go right down to the very first time they ever felt that, whenever that was formed. And oftentimes it's usually 0 to 6, about 5 to 6% of the time it's ancestral. So it jumps into great grandparents or something like that. But the point is, it's still a holographic memory, and we can actually reframe it there. Memories are no different than a recording. So if you had a camcorder and you went to a friend's birthday party and you recorded it, you could take that recording to an editor, to a video editor, and he could alter it. He could, you know, make it black and white. He could make it really loud and high pitched, or he could make it real low. He could do a number of things. He could make things blurry, make things crystal clear, and change the entire format and the coding of the way that was recorded. Well, we can do that as well with our memories. And it's never the story that's the problem. Again, the story is created by a very, very inadequate part of our brain. Okay, a part that's running and telling you everything's fine, creating stories that are convincing, and saying, you know, you're in charge, everything's fine, we got this. And usually that person is driving their vehicle, so to speak, right off the road into the ditch, as their brain is telling them, hey, everything's fine. So we get the entire body involved to actually address that hologram, and that has a significant impact throughout the rest of the neurology.
This is so cool. So are you using like lasers, or, you know, setting, you know, you're doing this all remotely. So like you're doing this just with thought patterns only?
I'm having their body basically pinpoint where it's at, and through a series of questions, there's no tools or any of that involved. It's just their own body, because your body has all the information necessary to
That's right.
recode it. And
Yeah.
you know, I've used laser before. I was a best practitioner of chiropractic. I've done acupuncture. I've done everything you
Okay.
could possibly think of. And what I found is whenever you are going in for a specific treatment from a body worker, okay,
Mhm.
um, and they could be doing Reiki, they could be doing best bioenergetic synchronization technique, or acupuncture, or even chiropractic. The same thing happens with chiropractic. There's going to be times when you go in to see that body worker and they give you a treatment, and you leave and you go, oh, that's exactly what I needed. And you get in the car and you leave and you're feeling really good.
Yeah.
And let's say you go back in 2 weeks and you have the same treatment, and you'll leave and you'll go, it just wasn't as good this time. I don't know what it was. And you asked a practitioner this, because I've interviewed several of these different workers, and they all say the same thing. Some treatments are great and some treatments just don't cut it. They just don't work for some reason that day. Well, why is that? Um, wouldn't you think it'd work the same way every time?
Of
What I
course.
what I found is what I found is the nervous system never resists itself. And that's where resistance comes in. It comes in on a few levels. There's 3 levels that we address in our school teaching practitioners. One of the levels is people inherently and unconsciously resist anything that comes from outside of what they believe about themselves. So, in other words, sometimes the chiropractic work actually can bypass certain firewalls and get in and make a big neurological change on the person.
Yeah.
Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it only goes so far, even if it's the exact same treatment. And acupuncture is the same way, because the person's nervous system is getting influence from something outside. And again, this is unconscious. This happens, without permission, without even awareness of it going on. So what I found is, if I have the person do the technique to themselves and I guide it through them, there's never any resistance. There's never any firewalls. It just goes straight through and does the change on its own, because they're doing it to themselves. And
Interesting.
yeah, so there's no resistance there. There's no blockage. I found that to be true with children as well. Children respond extremely well to this, because they can be playful, they participate really well, and it just goes right into the source. So that's one thing that's super cool, is if you're using your own nervous system to produce a result that you want, it's going to happen. It's going to happen,
Wow.
versus something from the outside influencing. And even though consciously you're like, okay, I got a headache, do your thing, do your acupuncture. I'm fully on the table. I'll do whatever necessary to get the best treatment, for both of us. There's parts of you that really want that, and maybe there's parts of you that are resistant to it, that are outside of your awareness. You see, our conscious mind is mathematically 0.006% of our overall awareness. So the
Wow.
conscious part of us, the part that we are, the thoughts that we are aware of, the thoughts we're thinking right now, is literally less than 1,000th of a percentage. So whenever you are doing work on yourself for an outcome that you want, using specific instructions, you get 100% of the entire nervous system, including all the unconscious mind, on board as well. So no lasers, no outside influences are needed, no outside tools are needed. Just the person, fully, um, fully committed and wanting to get the work themselves. So they do it to themselves, just with the proper coaching.
Fascinating. I love this. So one of my, ideas, or one of my perspectives is, working as parents to sort of prevent childhood trauma in our approaches and our connection with kiddos. And so you're talking about, implementing this kind of tool or technique with kids, and I love that idea. And I've heard, different practitioners, Dr. Keisha, uh, Dr. Keisha comes to mind, and I remember her talking about, in her own autoimmune struggle, she didn't recover until she worked on her childhood trauma. And so I've heard this from other practitioners as well. And this is fascinating. No techniques, no lasers, no weekly therapy sessions.
Right. Right.
How often do people need to come and see you for treatments? To
Well,
see improvement.
they'll see improvement um, after the first session.
Yeah.
So that's what's really cool, is we start knocking out the memories that are not serving them. And how this happens is because we naturally, the biggest compromise to people's health, to their destruction of their desires and dreams, to their relationships, is the fact that every hour they have 15 to 50 memories come up from the unconscious and visit the conscious mind. I mean, you can't even get in your car and drive down the street without thinking of three other things going on that day, or something in the past, something that happened 2 days ago, or maybe even a reoccurrence of something that happened when you're 12. These things all come up 15 to 50 times an hour, and it's just natural part of the human state. So whatever is in that holographic memory has everything encapsulated in there that happened at that moment that it was actually encapsulated, frozen, and stored. So when that comes up to the surface and you become aware of it, you are in fact living the same brainwave state, and you're living the same physiological state of distress. So your organs, go right back into that same state. And we've proven this with what are called SPECT scans. These prove that your brain and your nervous system, your fight or flight, your HPA axis, have no ability to distinguish between the actual event itself or the memory of the event. So when we start actually removing the charge of those memories as fast as they come up, so people feel it right away. And depending on where they're at, if it's a level 1, which means they had a single traumatic event occur. Okay. So let's say someone had a great life. They were happy every day, perfect digestion, no health issues, and they get in a severe car accident. And yet they go through the rehab. They survived. Everything seemed to be pretty good. And they're going through their life again, but they notice that they have really bad nightmares, or every time they drive by this particular area, and they have to do because they live by there, they start getting in a real panic. So that would be a level 1. September 11th, okay, would be a level 1 single event that occurred, and it froze your level of consciousness in that moment, and it's running under the surface. And so every once in a while that comes up and you're reliving that moment. Those take, one visit and maybe one follow-up just to see how it is, because it was one stored icon. Okay. For level 2, which is a pattern, like if you had abusive parents, or if you were in a very abusive relationship for years, or you had a job that maybe the boss was really condescending to you, multiple patterns over time, that's a level 2. And so that takes a little bit more to go in and unwind and uncoil and remove all those specific events that have occurred. So usually I don't see clients for more than 2 months. Usually after 2 months of time, seeing them weekly, their life has greatly improved.
Fascinating.
So it doesn't take very long.
Right.
And they have
That's
some
amazing.
tools. They have some tools after that to kind of maintenance their own nervous system in a way. So they've learned enough by going through the process with me giving them instructions that they can actually
they know what to do.
They know what to do for a large part. Yeah.
Yeah. And so have you been able to track how people's recovery changes? So at the beginning of this interview, you were talking about how, people weren't recovering from all of these autoimmune conditions and all of these, mystery illnesses and things. And what happens on that end, on the physical side, on the healing side?
Okay. So I've had a couple cases come to mind. I had a woman seek me out probably a year ago, and she was actually referred by another functional medicine doctor, and she had MS and extreme anxiety. So what I would call paralysis anxiety, to where she couldn't leave the house. She couldn't go on vacations. She couldn't even drive a car. That was one of her biggest goals. I'd just like to be able to do something, like get in a car and go shopping.
Right.
And she had every test imaginable you could think of and was on some of the best supplements. Because I even asked her, are you on this? Are you on, you know, mineral tranquilizers to calm your nervous system down? Are you taking, you know, the right kind of glandulars to support your thyroid and your adrenals? And she was taking all that, and it hasn't impacted. So anything I would recommend, she was already taking.
Yeah.
Um, so we started doing this work, deleting the holograms that were not serving her. And we did a lot of regressive work. And we come to find out at 3 years old, she was molested quite a bit. And she had no recollection of this whatsoever. So at 3 years old, the unconscious mind records this. And the reason why 0 to 6 is so crucial, people always wonder, what is it about childhood? I don't remember my childhood. Well, that is the time when your brain is, out of all the mammals, we develop in utero, but that we continue that level of development outside of the womb for the next, 5 to 6 years. So our brain during the 0 to 6 years old is literally making 1 million connections neurologically per second. So the environmental influences going on during that time greatly shape the structures of the brain, how the brain functions, how the neurotransmitters work, how, you know, how influential things are. The circuitry of the brain is all involved in those environmental influences. So if you're a 3-year-old and something like that's going on, you might not have any idea consciously what's going on, but your unconscious creates, kind of it seems very traumatic to the unconscious mind, and it will say things like, why did this happen? What do we have to do to make sure this doesn't happen again? And it could form, it's metaphorical. See, the unconscious mind looks at stories rather than understanding logic. Okay. So it'll create stories. And sometimes it'll say, well, I know this happened because I was attractive. And if I'm not attractive, it won't happen anymore. So now weight starts to come on, or hormonal imbalances begin to occur, things like that. And, people run tests. They get, as they grow into an adult, they wonder, why are my hormones always so off? And they're taking things, and they're trying more diets, and they say, oh, I lost weight, but the minute I lost my willpower and I was in control of that consciously, it slips right back, and there I am eating chocolate cake at night again. I have no idea why.
Yeah.
Because the unconscious mind's running the show, and it actually encodes lessons for these experiences. So there's a lesson in that experience that you have to satisfy to alleviate that driving force going on.
Sure. The messaging. Yeah.
Right.
That's fascinating. Kind of thinking about all of that, and the formation of the brain and the development, and I guess working with parents, what are some things parents can do, to
Right.
help with that, at
Right.
an early age.
At an early age. Well, because this isn't something that we do on purpose. And I traumatized my children, and and it was because of the patterns I learned from my mom, and she learned from her mom, and so on and so forth. Even though I'm a very loving father, and I'm engaged, and my kids trust me and all that, I still didn't I didn't know what I was doing. And that's the problem with society today, is
Right.
we don't trauma is so entwined to our culture that we overlook it. And our professionals, our academia experts, our healthcare system has no real clue of what's going on. And this is not even controversial. It's in literature. It's in well printed literature that early adverse effects in kids lead to compensation patterns so they can survive childhood, but these later become the source of pathology, hands
Right.
down. So we go back and change those early experiences, and their nervous system starts to reflect that. So what are some things some parents can do? Well, I would say that this gets a little woo-woo, but it's very scientific. Okay. I investigate, I've constantly researched the mind, how the mind works and how the mind actually influences things outside of our body. We're told that the mind is nothing more than electrical activity in the brain, but that's not true. We can actually influence things around us. Masaru Emoto influenced water with thoughts, with intention. Okay, the
Right.
message in water.
Yes.
Cleve Baxter showed that if you hook a plant up to a lie detector test and you form the intention of burning the leaves, the polygraph machine jumps. Okay. So there's also private detectives I've talked to before, British SAS soldiers, which are special forces. These people are taught never to look at the back of a subject or a sentry or anything, because if you just look at someone, they'll sense it. Okay.
Yes. Yes.
And again, this is considered taboo by many of our establishments. So what can we do as parents to make our children have better connection? Something we've lost in our culture. In our
Yes.
hunter-gathering times, you know, children were carried for the first 3 years. No, they were held by everyone, not necessarily the parents, but the aunts,
Yes.
the uncles, the grandparents. So kids were held for the first 3 years of their life in tribes by loving, nurturing adults. And today we don't have that. So there's no simple answer, but I would say the very first thing that you can do, and this is what I tell parents to do, and you'll make a huge impact. If your kids and even the teenagers do the same thing, and they always have a need for connection,
Yep.
they always have a need for connection.
Yep.
And although it may feel uncomfortable, because again, it's something outside of your nervous system, it's something outside of what you're used to doing.
Yep.
And it can be interpreted as painful, it can be interpreted as uncomfortable. So it might take some practice doing this. But parents with their kids at any age, young, 3, 6 to 13-year-old kids, if you're sitting there with the child and you put the intention in your mind, not the words, the intention that I'm overwhelmed with joy to have you here. And I welcome you in my presence fully. I fully welcome you in my presence. And I'm overwhelmed with joy to have you here. Their intention, their unconscious, their mirror neurons in their body will pick up on that. And what happens is they feel connected to you.
Mm.
And that starts the healing process. Many times when I regress people back, and let's say they have an athletic, they want to perform better, okay, and they come to me and they say, I'm hitting a window in my athletic abilities, and I'm not sure why. It might be something or it might be something else. I let the unconscious mind tell us why the block is there, and all of a sudden they're 3 and something inappropriate's going on, and they would have never thought about this. Whenever it's usually inappropriate, it's a lack of connection from an adult. And we say, what can we do to make this holographic memory better? If you could go back and change this memory to anything you want, what would you do? 95% of the time in autoimmune cases, and in this athletic situation I'm talking about with this woman, 95% of the time they want connection from their mom. I just want my mom to give me a loving hug. So I use my imagination a lot, and that's what really helps the process, is giving them a good picture to work with to really seat that in.
Yep.
But oftentimes what we'll do is say, okay, your mom's there. She's welcoming you in her arms. She's overjoyed to have you in her presence. And that has a much bigger impact than just saying, okay, she loves you.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Totally.
Love is subjective. And some people love means painful, because that's all they grew up with is someone that maybe I did that because I love you.
That's right.
So that's subjective. But if you say, and parents for children, parents for teenagers, if you form the intention inside of you and you don't say I love you, but you say this, I'm overwhelmed with joy to have you in my presence. I welcome you fully in my presence.
Yep.
And you don't have to say it. You think it, and you think it deeply, and you just feel it. They'll pick up on that. And I'll tell you this, if you do that with your kids and you do it a couple times, even it might feel uncomfortable because, I mean, there's a good chance maybe nobody ever did that to you,
Right.
right? When you were young, maybe your parent never thought to do that. They were stressed out about things, and that's just part of our society today. It's not anyone's fault. It's just something we've lost as a human species, right? But
Yep.
if you look at your kids and you feel that and you think that, and you're really in that moment of, I welcome you in my presence and I'm overjoyed to have you in my presence, they'll pick up on it and you'll see their mood shift. All of a sudden they'll feel better, and you'll see them start to be a little bit more, um, a little maybe less tense, less sad,
Yep.
less disengaged.
Yep.
They, if they're on their video game and they're or their phone or whatever else, it's because they need connection,
Yep.
and they're not getting the connection from the parent. They're getting it from the person or from the likes, their friends on Facebook, or this video game or whatever else. And if you can put that intention out there, intention is so powerful. Their mirror neurons will
Wow.
perk up on it, and they're more likely to become more present with you. And the more you do that, the more you're going to have a relationship, a healthy relationship, not just having them next to you. I'm talking about a connection on a atomic or a subatomic level.
Wow. That's incredible. That truly, when we started talking about having that intention, and like I was getting goosebumps. Like
And it's
I could feel it.
and that is, and I'll tell you what, that's the language of the universe.
Yes.
See, the language doesn't understand words. It doesn't understand, the universe doesn't understand words. It understands vibrations. And just by parents actively coming up with the feeling deep inside that I welcome you in my presence, you'll see the kids. If a kid's on the ground, he's crying, he's upset, he's needing a connection. And if you just think that feeling, you feel that, and you don't express it, you don't tell him,
Yeah.
because he doesn't it's not going to register as much as if you really feel it. They'll pick up on it, and that's what shapes their brain,
Yeah.
and that's what shapes their personality as well.
Totally. I love it. And yeah, I can see that really having a major impact on kiddos. Wow.
Yeah, and even, like I said, any age, especially young age, but that's what I tell all my new mothers. I say,
Yeah.
just, I'll tell you what, put everything on pause, because that will be right here for you, and really give that intention to your child for the next 3 years, 6 years. And after that, nothing else really matters, because their brain is going to be so formed with that nurturing environment of pure intentions. Again,
And
words don't really cut it. you know it's the feelings inside of it and the intention behind it that really drive how we function as human beings at a physiological level.
wow, that's incredible. This is just so valuable. My, my mind is blown. This is great. Um, okay, so your lady with MS, you were sharing.
Yes.
So
Uh-huh.
how did she fare?
Within about 7 weeks, she was able to get in a car and go shopping. And there was times in her mind she'd go, "Wow, I can't believe I'm doing this." Her symptoms started going away. She could leave the house without any kind of anxiety, and she was able to start functioning and going on vacations and things like that. And that was less than 2 months, and with no lab work on my end done, no supplements, nothing else, just going in. And what we do is kind of what I explained just now. Okay.
Yeah.
We go back to those early memories, and they're pliable. And
Mhm.
this isn't something a person's going to do consciously. They have to have the right guidance. But you go back, change those. And what I did was we gave her needs that she required in those memories.
Okay.
The MS symptoms and the anxiety and the ability to leave without having, a panic attack was just a way of her inner child expressing needs that weren't met.
Right.
And so we went back and we fulfilled those needs one at a time. I'm never the guy in charge. I always let our unconscious mind take us right to the spot. And once we get there,
Yep.
once we hit what's called the T1, it's the level of overwhelm where her nervous system was so overwhelmed that there was something frozen and encapsulated in a hologram. We find that, we reframe that, we provide the missing frequencies needed, which is something again that's a little more cutting edge than the other therapies that I've seen. We satisfy that need and we anchor it in, and then we come out. And next thing I know, she's like, "Wow, I'm just really calm." And within a day or two of her body kind of catching up, her body, because we change the mind so much, the body is nothing more than a physical manifestation of what's going on inside the mind.
Yep.
If there's a person, unless they were juggling a chainsaw and it took an arm off, I mean, that's an exception. Or they fell out of a tree, or they got in a car accident. The mind, whenever a person has chronic illness and chronic pain and chronic fatigue and chronic digestive issues and thyroid issues, there's something in their mind that is alleviating and causing that. And again, 99.994% of the mind is below the threshold of conscious awareness. So it's not something that we can just pinpoint. And with our conscious mind, we're not going to be able to just go, oh, that's why that's doing that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So.
And then goes away. Poof. No.
Yeah.
Like that.
Doesn't work. It doesn't work that simple. But it's all about satisfying needs that human beings need, or we're born with. We're born with two needs as humans. We're born with two emotional needs. One is the need for attachment, and the other is a need for our attachment to our authentic self. So when we're born, we are fully connected to our authentic self. We know who we are, we know our purpose, and we're connected to what's called our gut feelings.
Yeah.
And our gut feelings are never wrong.
Yeah.
Our gut feelings, see, we think of the gut as just a digestive organ, but it's actually a sensory organ. It actually takes in the entire environment and scans and gets a full picture of what's going on and sends that to our gut, and it amplifies it and sends it to our brain. And that's our gut feelings, but it's not the loud voice. It's an urge or a feeling. Okay. And when we're growing up as children and we have these two needs, oftentimes what the trauma really is not the witnessing of dad hit mom. It's not the being left alone in a room when there's a thunderstorm and you're terrified. It's not the disconnection or the emotional lack of emotional involvement from a parent. That's not necessarily the trauma itself. The trauma is when a child disconnects from that authentic self because they want to preserve the need for attachment. And this happens oftentimes because children take everything
personally.
Right? That's the word I was looking for. They take everything personally. And if they'll so a little kid growing up that has, if it's an adult with an autoimmune, usually what's happened is, this is about 90% of cases, and this could be MS or ALS, they're all the same personalities in this shell. They all have these same behaviors that are coping mechanisms, because something happens early to them and they take it personally and they say, well, this happened to me. I must be a bad person. And so what happens is they begin to establish coping mechanisms of trying to be very good, to trying to prove it, to trying to say, I am a good person. See, I am a good person, even though they don't believe it down here. And those are the people that become extremely nice, the ones that smile, the ones that force the smile, the ones that don't have any boundaries. In other words, you can do whatever you want to them and they never get upset. They repress all anger, they repress their emotions, and the emotional centers in the brain have a strong overlap to the emotional centers, or I'm sorry, the emotional centers in the brain have a strong overlap to the immune system, to the nervous system, and to the hormonal apparatuses. So if you're repressing the emotions, you're actually repressing all the others. And that's why if you're oppressing your anger, your immune system begins to get repressed as well. And that's despite taking vitamin C and NAC and things for glutathione and eating right and eating citrus and eating vegetables. Your emotional overlap is way too powerful for these nutrients to really do their thing.
Yeah, that's amazing. So it really speaks to the whole mind, body, spirit approach in a way. We're not,
Right,
we can eat all the vegetables in the world and it's only going to take us so far, essentially.
right, right. If
Yeah,
our mind isn't right, it's again, we're missing a big key component to that.
100%. So are you treating patients now? Are you treating training practitioners? Like what does your practice look like now?
So a little bit of both. I usually most of my time is involved developing the school. We have a holographic manipulation therapy school program going now, where we're training doctors and practitioners, and we have a couple psychologists on board, and we're training them in these techniques. And I meet with them twice a month, where we sharpen things up and we go over cases and things like that. And on top of that, I am seeing people through Zoom, a few days of the week. So
Amazing. So how do people find you, Gabe? People are looking for
um,
you.
usually I get a lot of referrals from people. And usually I think my wife runs a lot of this. We run this together. Okay, this this
Mhm.
this schooling's a big part of her as well. So she's like my business partner that does a lot of the things, comes up with a lot of the ideas on things, and she's just as much involved in this as I am in this work.
Awesome.
And so I think we have accounts with everything, but we're on Facebook a lot as well. So I think a majority of people find us through posts I'm doing on Facebook or something like that.
So cool. Awesome.
So yeah, Facebook. Gabe Roberts is my personal page. Dr. Gabe Roberts is my professional page, and
Okay.
there it just shows that what we specialize in is what's called psychosomatic. So we treat physiological illnesses that have at their root cause repressed emotion.
Nice. That's amazing. True, really getting down and deep. So, functional medicine, precision medicine, root cause medicine, but this is
Right.
really getting to the honing in on the subconscious mind, which is incredible. I'm fascinated by the idea of the image of, memory stored in a holographic way. It's mind blowing to me. It really speaks to me in my visual brain, being able
Yeah.
to
Yep.
picture those memories and dissolving them in a way, clearing
Yeah.
them.
Just dissolving them, removing all the fragments. So oftentimes what I do is have someone has a feeling they want to get rid of. And so
Mhm.
what's super cool is they never have to relive it. We just get rid of the
Right.
feelings, we pinpoint it. And again, they don't have to know the story. And that's several women always they're like, man, I just love that I don't even have to know what it is.
That's appealing.
That's very appealing. You never have to know what
Yes.
it is, and you don't even have to
Yeah.
believe it. So I
Right.
never ask people to believe it. I just say, participate in this, answer with your very first response, do exactly what I'm doing, and you're going to get all the change work you want today. Um, and then I ask them to bring that feeling back. So that's one way I say, okay, that feeling that you've carried for 20 years, it took us 2 minutes to get rid of it. Bring it back. Really try to bring back that feeling that you don't want anymore. And uh, they'll sit there and they'll just try it, or they'll say, I don't want it. And that's okay too. But I sometimes challenge them. I'll say, bring that feeling back. And when they do, they notice it just runs further away. It's just gone. And that's what happens when you remove all the fragments. These are permanent changes, and I know this myself because I had my own traumatic childhood growing up, very, very, very traumatic, abusive childhood growing up, amplified by spending 8 years in the Marine Corps, and I've had my experiences, and this a lot of in many ways coming about this and learning and doing this was a way to end my own suffering. It's what
Sure.
it was. So,
Sure.
and that's usually the path that we as healers take.
For
So,
sure. Absolutely. Something puts us on this path for sure.
absolutely.
Well, the world is really lucky to have you, Gabe. I'm so excited that we got to spend this time together, and
Me as well, Peggy. Thank you.
I'm just blown away, and I want to make sure that we get the message out there, and people need to know that this is a thing, and like we can heal those brains, and we can get our kids on a different path. And that's really my mission, is to, you know, enough with all of my peers treating, people with all these autoimmune conditions. Like, let's start younger. Let's work with ourselves and our kids, and let's get them on a different path. So we're not,
Right.
the world isn't getting sicker and sicker.
Right.
So,
I love it, Peggy, and thank you for all that you're doing because
awesome.
it's a big need today more than ever.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And yeah, so we have to start with the parents, and yeah, so we'll
Right.
get there. We'll get there. Awesome. All right. Thank you so much, Gabe. And we'll be in touch, and hope to talk to you again. This was
All right,
awesome.
Peggy.
All
Thank you
right.
very
Thanks
much
so
for your
much.
time.
All right. Thank
Bye bye.
you. Bye.